Welcome in, everybody, to episode 26 of Black and Gold Weekly. Another week is come and gone, and we are on to the next episode. It's been a few weeks since the Bruins have played a game, and we are certainly headed towards off-season mode here, and taking a look at what the Bruins could be doing this summer as they try and gear up for another high-level contending season in 2021-22. And it's felt a little weird not having Bruins hockey to talk about, or not having games going on or anything like that over the last couple of weeks. But the off season is here, and there's certainly plenty still to look at. So it's just me this week, as you can see. But it's going to be a really fun episode because we're going to be doing something that is very different from anything else that I've done on this show before. First part of the show, we're going to look at the Bruins free agents and RFAs, UFAs, and play a little game called Re-Sign or Let Go. And I'll talk about each player and why I think the Bruins should re-sign them, or why I think the Bruins should let them go and just leave in free agency and whatnot. But we'll do that. And then what we're going to do in the second part is look at other teams around the league and see if they have any pending unrestricted free agents that I think the Bruins should be interested in going after and possibly bringing in the offseason. So this is going to be an episode a lot looking ahead towards free agency and re-signing guys, signing new players, and you know, some adjustments that could be made to the roster for next season. So again, it's going to be a fun episode, definitely something different than what I've done on this show before, and hopefully you guys enjoy it as we head into off-season content here. But before we get into it and get started, I do want to give a huge thank you to Mark Allred and the entire Black and Gold Productions team. This show is in The show is in partnership with Black and Gold Productions and would not be happening without them. So thank you, Mark. Thank you to everyone at B&G for all the support. It is very, very much appreciated. I also want to talk about the links down in the description of this video. There are 3 links there. Top one is for Boston Bruins gear. Second one is for NHL gear, any team that you want. And the third one is for NCAA college gear. And there's a ton of different things to choose from. If you're in the market for any of those things, it would be greatly, greatly appreciated if you could check out the links, whether it's Bruins, another NHL team, or a college team. There's so many different products, so many different things to choose from. You know, you've got all kinds of shirts, long sleeves, short sleeves, hoodies, sweatpants, hats, and then tons of different accessories as well. There's really a great selection to choose from, and different apparel and different products. So it would really help out a lot if you're in the market for any of those things, if you could check out via those links in the description. But now let's get into it here. Looking ahead to the Bruins offseason a little bit, particularly free agency. And we are going to start with the Bruins roster itself, where they have quite a few pending free agents, both restricted and unrestricted. And we'll talk about whether I think the Bruins should re-sign them or let them go. So let's move on over to Cap Friendly here as we look at the Boston Bruins. They're currently projected to have about $30 million in cap space to work with this summer. Now, obviously, they have a lot of guys pending, or guys that are pending free agents that are not currently being counted in that $30 million. So when they re-sign guys, it is going to be a lot less come unrestricted free agency for them to have, but they're in very good place, in very good shape cap wise. They have the 6th most cap space in the NHL, and that is including Seattle. If you take Seattle, who doesn't really have a team yet, out of the equation, they have the 5th most cap space in the NHL. So Boston does have a lot to work with here. But let's take a look through the roster and take a look at some of these unrestricted and restricted free agents that they have, starting with the forward group and starting with Taylor Hall. So Taylor Hall is obviously a pending UFA coming up this offseason. He played really, really well for the Bruins after the trade deadline in the regular season, had a pretty good series against the Washington Capitals in round number 1, and then went very quiet in the Islanders series in round number 2, as did many of the Bruins forwards outside of their top guys in Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak. Pretty much everybody else went quiet in that Islanders series, and Hall was definitely one of them, as he didn't really get much going there against New York. But all in all, I think Taylor Hall played very, very well for the Bruins, and I think he could really be a big piece for this team going forward if they are able to get him re-signed. And if I am the Boston Bruins, I am absolutely trying to re-sign Taylor Hall. With the way that he played, the way that he looked after that trade and since coming here, I really, really think Boston should do what they can to try and get him re-signed. Now, there are certain stipulations to this deal that it would have to be a reasonable deal. I am not giving Taylor Hall $8 million a year. I'm sorry, but if it's going to be a huge contract like that, I'm out. No, thank you. I'm looking at Taylor Hall on a probably 2 or 3 year deal at around $6.5 million per year. I would not go anything over 4 years. He's already 29 years old. You don't want to lock yourself into a long-term contract here, especially the guy who's had a pretty inconsistent career and a lot of up and down seasons throughout his NHL's time. I wouldn't want anything longer than 4 years, and I think somewhere around $6.5 million would be a very reasonable and solid cap hit for Taylor Hall. When you start getting up over 7, I think you're overpaying. And I wouldn't be as bullish about doing that. I don't think you're going to get him for anything obviously under 6. He's too good of a player to get for that cheap. So I think if you can get Taylor Hall on a 2 or 3 year deal somewhere around $6.5 million per year, I am absolutely doing that if I'm the Boston Bruins. And he is a guy that I 100% think that the Bruins should be trying to bring back this year. David Krejci. This is an interesting one. He's 35 years old. He's definitely going to have to take a pay cut. He's not making $7 million a year again, but I think he knows that at 35 that his contract is going to go down. I would like to see Krejci somewhere around 5, and if you can get Krejci to come back on a 1 or 2 year deal at $5 million per season, if you bring Taylor Hall back, you're bringing David Krejci back because those two played very, very well together. They worked out great on the same line, and I think if you bring one of them back, you definitely should bring back the other and let them have a full season together and see what kind of production you can get out of these two if they can play together for an entire season and playoff run next year. I absolutely want David Krejci back along with Taylor Hall, and I think that for the next year or two at least, they could be a really good second line duo for this team. Nick Ritchie. So Ritchie actually had a very solid year in the regular season. He went really quiet during the playoffs. He did not do much in the postseason. But again, obviously contract dependent. If you're bringing him back as a fourth liner, I would look at Ritchie for maybe a 1 year deal or a 2 year deal, as long as it's good and cheap. 1 year, $1 million, something like that. I'll bring back Ritchie on a deal like that. Absolutely. As long as he knows that he's playing in the bottom 6, and if he can give you 10 goals and 15 to 20 points as a fourth line guy, and maybe have 4 or 5 fights next season and bring some physicality, then I would be willing to take Ritchie back on a short-term, low-cost deal. If it's anything more than that, then I think you just let him go, and maybe another team will overpay for him. He did have 15 goals this past year, and it was a big upgrade from what he did the year before. So, he is coming off a solid season. If you can get him on a short-term, cheap deal, I would do it as a third or fourth line guy. If it's anything more than that, then I'm letting Ritchie walk. Andre Kasha, he's gone. He's not. You're not qualifying him. He's gone. I'm not bringing Kasha back. This guy could not stay healthy all year. He got hurt the second game of the season, and then tried to come back and got immediately hurt again. He's got a major concussion issue now, many concussions in his history. He may not play in the NHL again. Like, there's a legitimate possibility that Kase may not play in the NHL again. So I think at this point, you are just cutting your losses. You are letting Kase walk. And I don't know, obviously wishing him all the best in the future. I don't know what his career is going to look like or where it's going to take him from here. But I am not bringing back Ondrej Kase as in a Boston Bruins uniform, that is for sure. Sean Kuraly, I am not bringing back, in my opinion. Just bad year for him this year. Wasn't able to contribute anything offensively. He's getting into his late 20s now. He's a UFA. I think you have other players, there are other guys that I want to see come up and play at the NHL level at a more consistent basis. I want to see Frederic in the lineup full-time. I want to see Studnicka in the lineup. Kuraly is a guy that's kind of getting in the way a little bit, and he doesn't really do decent penalty killer, but other than that, he doesn't really bring a whole lot. He's not overly physical. He had a really bad year offensively this year. There was a lot of times where he just did not look good. There were a lot of stretches during this year where he did not look good. I'm letting Kuraly walk. He's probably going to get a deal out there with a different team as a fourth-line center. I think that there are other teams who maybe aren't as, aren't as deep or not, maybe looking for that kind of penalty killing, fourth-line grinding forward who maybe isn't even an extra guy for them. I don't know. I feel like Kuraly will get a job out there on another team. Probably not a team as good as Boston. I think he's probably going to end up signing somewhere where it's a kind of a middle-of-the-road mediocre team. He'll probably get a job, but I've seen enough of him in a Bruins uniform, and really disappointed with the way that he played this year. I would let him walk. And then Trent Frederic's an RFA. I would absolutely have him back. I fully expect him to be back. I want Frederic playing a full season on the fourth line next year. I absolutely think he can give you probably, 8 to 10 goals, somewhere in there over the course of a full season. I think you can add on another 5 to 10 assists on top of that, depending on the players around him. And he's obviously going to fight. He's going to hit. He can bring some physicality. He can, great agitator, can really get under the opponent's skin. I want Frederic back, and I want him in Boston full-time on the fourth line as a NHL regular next season. Now moving on to the D-Corps. Steven Kampfer, 32 years old, been with the Bruins, on a couple different stints now. He's a UFA. Listen, if Kampfer's willing to take a two-way deal where he can be moved between the AHL and NHL easily, then I would have Kampfer come back. He'd probably start the year in Providence. He's certainly not going to be making the Boston Bruins opening lineup, but as an organizational depth guy, as maybe a 9th or 10th defenseman in your organization who can play in the AHL and can be called up if need be, I would take Kampfer back on a two-way deal. If he's looking for an NHL deal, which at this point he probably isn't, because I think he knows that he's very much a tweener, anything more than that, I would let him go. But if he's willing to take a two-way deal and can be placed in Providence as just a depth guy, then I would take Kampfer back for the P Bruins. Absolutely. Kevin Miller, man, the injuries are just, I love Kevin Miller, and I will always say that. I will never be ashamed of that and never be afraid to say that. I have loved Kevin Miller throughout his career. Real tough, hard-nosed, stay-at-home D-man, my kind of player. I've always loved Kevin Miller, but the injuries every single year now. I mean, it was a huge feat just for him to come back and be able to play this season. Yet he still missed time, and he missed the end of the playoffs because he got injured. And honestly, I would love to see Miller just hang him up. I mean, he's got his show with Brad Marchand. They've got their outdoor clothing company. Like, he's got, a business to run and to be a part of after hockey. He has his post-hockey career set up. Like, honestly, don't beat your body up anymore, man. You've had a good run. You've played some real solid seasons in the NHL. You've turned out to be a really, really good player a guy coming out of the University of Vermont that really wasn't expected to be an NHLer, to have the NHL career that you did. You've done it. You've made it in the NHL. I think at this point, if I'm Kevin Miller, I know it's tough and you never want to stop playing the game that you love so much, but I would think about hanging him up and just moving on and moving into the business world and getting ready for your post-hockey life. But I mean, maybe if it was like a 1-year league minimum, if he wants to come back and try and be a depth guy as like a number 7 or number 8, maybe, I wouldn't be opposed to that if I'm Boston. If it's a league minimum contract, it really doesn't hurt you cap-wise. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I'd like to see Kevin Miller just retire personally and hopefully keep his body, what's left, healthy, because he has had a lot of injury issues. Jarred Tinordi, Tinordi was okay coming in the role that he was in. I mean, he ended up having to play a little bit more than I think I would have wanted him to because of some of the injuries on the back end. I don't think Tinordi's going to be back, though. I think he'll just hit the UFA market. Maybe he could sign a 2-way deal. I mean, again, similar to Kampfer, like, you're an organizational depth guy. If you're going to take a 2-way deal, then why not? You can put him in Providence. If you start having injury issues up in Boston, you can call him up. You don't have to waive him to send him back down if he's on a 2-way deal. Like, if they're willing to take that kind of contract, then why not? But Tinordi would not be a top priority or anything to try and get re-signed. That would be kind of just a end of the summer type thing, just to fill out your roster. But he's definitely not somebody that I would bring back with an NHL role in mind. If he's looking for that, then I think he would have to go elsewhere. Brandon Carlo. This is an important one. Now, he's an RFA. He's not a UFA. But Brandon Carlo, Boston needs to get a solid deal done with him. Something in the 4-year range, I would hope. Something around there. Not too big of money. Probably $4 million, somewhere around there per season. Brandon Carlo, though, is a very, very important defenseman for this group. Obviously, your top guy is Charlie McAvoy, but Carlo's a very, very important defensive defenseman for this team. He plays a lockdown role. He kills penalties. He's very good in his own zone. He's not a guy that's going to give you a ton of points. He's not going to put up a lot on the score sheet, but he's so good defensively, and we saw what happened without Brandon Carlo in the Islanders series. When he got injured in that series, it was all downhill from there for the Bruins D. Their defense absolutely collapsed without Brandon Carlo, and it ended up costing them that series. So I think Brandon Carlo needs to come back. He's a great complement in the top 4 to go along with McAvoy and Grzelcyk. And I mean, if I'm the Bruins, he is one of my top priorities this offseason to get re-signed. But that's going to be a really important one. The Bruins need Brandon Carlo and his shutdown defensive game in their lineup. If they aren't able to bring him back, which he's an RFA, so they're going to. But if somehow he ends up not being back, then they're going to have to go out and replace him with a similar kind of player. That's going to be a lot harder, a lot easier said than done, a lot harder to actually do, especially somebody who's as young as Carlo at just 24. Brandon Carlo's got to be back for the Bruins. That is one of the top priorities of this offseason. And then Mike Riley, obviously came over at the trade deadline from the Ottawa Senators, played really, really well in the Bruins uniform. At the end of the Islanders series, things kind of went downhill for Riley as it did for the entire Bruins team and the entire Bruins defense. I'm not really going to hold that specifically against him. That was a group effort from everybody at the end there that really came up short. But I really liked what I saw for the most part from Mike Riley in a Boston Bruins uniform, and a puck-moving left-shot defenseman that this team really, really needed. I want to see Mike Riley back for the Bruins. I really want to see Boston give him a contract. Nothing too crazy. I mean, he's 27 years old. I think you're looking at probably a 2 or 3 year deal. I don't think it's going to be anything longer than that, but probably somewhere around $3.5 to $4 million per season. I would love to have Mike Riley back in a Boston uniform. And then finally, the goaltenders, Tuukka Rask and Yaroslav Halak. Now, I'm going to say this right now. Halak, I do not think is going to be back. He had a really down year this past year. He's 36 years old. Boston's got some young goalies that are making that push to move up to the NHL full-time. I don't think Halak is going to be back. The big question is Tuukka Rask. Does Tuukka come back? He said that he wants to be back. He said that he doesn't want to play for any other team. Retirement's still an option. He's 34. There's been a lot talked about him possibly going back to play in Finland. There's been talk about him just retiring from hockey in general. We do know that he has a torn labrum, and that if he does play next season, won't be able to get on the ice in game action until probably February of 2022. So even if the Bruins do re-sign him, he's not going to be your starting goaltender at the beginning of the year, and he's going to miss at least half the season. So. Again, I would be open. He's going to be taking a pay cut. He's not going to be making $7 million a year again. But I would be open to Tuukka Rask coming back as, kind of a veteran guy to help these young guys along. I wouldn't mind him coming back for the second half of the season in the playoffs. If it's on, a cheaper deal, somewhere probably around $4.5 million per year. If he's willing to take that, then sure. If not, then you tell him you're going to play somewhere else or you're going to retire. Again, I'm not overpaying for Tuukka Rask at this point. I see absolutely no reason to do that for a 34-year-old guy who's probably coming down to his final season or two in the NHL to begin with. But if he's willing to take a reasonable deal, then I don't see why not. You're going to have to do something else at goal anyway, because you need a starter for the beginning of the season when he's not going to be available. So Boston's going to be making a goaltending move regardless. But if you want Rask to come back at the end of the year and be a 1B or something like that, then sure, why not? If he doesn't want to do that, then you let him make his decision somewhere else, but you don't give him a contract and re-sign him. But overall, that's what I think on all of the Bruins pending free agents. Obviously, they have quite a few this season. There's a few that I think are going to be gone for sure. There are some others that I'd certainly love to see them bring back. They certainly have a lot of cap space to work with here. And it's not only going to make a big impact on them with their own players, but also with other teams as well, and free agents from other teams that they could possibly sign. And that's what we're going to take a look at in the second part of this show. So I am going to now start going through other teams here and taking a look at what they have available as far as pending free agents. If there anybody, or this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to go through every team just in order that aren't the Boston Bruins, and I'm going to pick out one player from that team that I think the Bruins should be interested in free agency, if obviously they could re-sign if they hit free agency, and just kind of talk about that player and why I think that they could be a good fit in Boston. Or maybe some teams don't have anybody. And if that's the case, then I'll say there's nobody really here that I'd be interested in. So let's start with the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're well over, thank you for the ad. They are well over the salary cap by quite a bit. But they're going to have to lose somebody in the offseason. They're going to have to lose multiple players in the offseason to be cap compliant for next year. So let's take a look at pending for UFAs. I'm only looking at UFAs because RFAs are a lot harder to get. You'd have to make an offer sheet, and that hardly ever happens. I'm strictly looking at UFAs for Boston here. And looking through, they've got quite a few. But somebody that really sticks out to me that I think could really look good in a Boston Bruins uniform is Blake Coleman. Now, I don't know if the Bruins are going to be able to afford him, but they have plenty of cap space to work with, and there's a third-line spot available, especially if Jake DeBrusk gets traded, and there's been some rumblings about DeBrusk possibly being traded this offseason. I would absolutely love Blake Coleman on the Boston Bruins third line. He is a Bruins kind of player. He's physical. He's gritty. He has some offensive touch, though. He can score goals. He goes to the net. Very, very important player for the Tampa Bay Lightning over the past couple seasons. And I am a huge Blake Coleman fan. I would love to see him on the Bruins third line. And that would be a really good target from Tampa Bay, in my opinion. Next up, we have the Islanders. Some pending UFAs for the Isles here. Kyle Palmieri, Cole Bardreau, Travis Zajac, Casey Cizikas, Braden Coburn and Andy Green on the back end. Those are two older guys. Not really interested there. Kyle Palmieri was heavily linked to the Bruins, and before they traded for Taylor Hall, there was a lot of talk about them possibly going after Palmieri. They could still potentially do that this offseason, and imagine if you had Palmieri on the right side of the second line with Krejci in the middle and Hall on the left, and that would drop Craig Smith down to the third line, where I think he's a little bit better suited to be a third liner. Kyle Palmieri, if the Bruins could make it work financially, money-wise, Palmieri would be a guy that I would absolutely love to see in a Bruins uniform, because I think he could really level out the top six and fill out the top six for the Bruins on that right side. And then you would have two legitimate scoring lines in Boston. And scoring depth would definitely be significantly improved if you get Palmieri in on the second line and drop Craig Smith down to the third line. These scoring issues and the depth scoring issues that the Bruins have been having, I think, could definitely be improved if Palmieri was in a Boston uniform. So, not sure if that would financially happen, but definitely something that I'd be interested in if I'm the Bruins, if they could make it work. Vegas Golden Knights, they don't have a whole lot to look for here, except Alec Martinez. Oh boy, Alec Martinez. This would be a dream. This would be an absolute dream if the Bruins were able to get Martinez. Now, he is 33 years old, so he's not somebody that you're going to go out and be giving, a 6-year deal to. But if you could get Martinez on a 2 or 3 year deal in free agency, even a 4-year deal, I mean, this guy has been one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL for a long time. He was a crucial part of 2 LA Kings Stanley Cup winning teams, playing great in Vegas since the trade over to the Golden Knights. I'm a huge Alec Martinez fan. And I would be all over the Boston Bruins bringing him in. He's a left shot, too, where the Bruins definitely need some help. I would love to see Martinez in a Bruins uniform. Pittsburgh now. This is a team that might be more than willing to make some off-season moves with this group. Given the fact that they lost in the first round again. There's not a whole lot jumping out at me as far as Pittsburgh goes in UFAs. But Freddie Gaudreau here, 28 years old, he had a really solid season for the Penguins in a very depth role with that team. If Sean Kuraly doesn't come back, which again I wouldn't be bringing Kuraly back if I'm Boston, Freddie Gaudreau could be a guy that I'd be interested in if I'm the Bruins in a fourth line role, maybe to try and again bring some depth scoring in. I wouldn't, again, he's not very big, so I still want the Bruins fourth line to pack that punch physically, which I think has been lacking a little bit. And Gaudreau definitely doesn't help there, but he has the ability to put the puck in the net. So out of anybody for Pittsburgh, Gaudreau I would maybe have an eye on, but I don't think there's anybody really there that jumps out as a go-get type of guy. Chicago here. Chicago is a team it doesn't have a whole lot as far as UFAs go. Vinny Hinostroza, that's pretty much it. I'm not really going after anybody from Chicago. There's nobody there. that I'm interested in. Looking now at Washington, they have obviously Alexander Ovechkin. They have Chara. He's not coming back. Ledoux isn't really anything. Craig Anderson's a UFA. No, there's really not much here. Obviously, Ovechkin would be, incredible to have, but he's not. Alexander Ovechkin, I think, is either going to play for the Washington Capitals or go back to Russia. I don't think he's going to play for any other NHL team. I don't think he's going to play for the Boston Bruins, but I don't think there's anyone really there in Washington that the Bruins would get or be interested in. Let's see. Looking now at the San Jose Sharks, this is a team that is in very difficult position financially, salary cap wise, and I'm not really seeing anything here either. They're UFAs. Patrick Marleau's 41. No, thank you. Curtis Gabriel, he's really an AHL guy. I don't think you're going to see him back, really a full-time role in the NHL. He's a fighter. Marcus Sorensen, he's 29, borderline fourth liner. Nobody really there I'm going after. Montreal, the hated Habs. Let's see what they've got for UFAs. Corey Perry has been incredible in these playoffs. Had another really solid season and then has upped his game in the postseason. Listen, if I think Montreal's probably going to re-sign him, but if they don't, why not? If you're the Boston Bruins, why not have Perry be your fourth line right wing? You cannot tell me that Corey Perry is not an upgrade over Chris Wagner, because he absolutely is. So, if he hits the open market, that could be your fourth line right winger right there. I would not be opposed to that. Joel Armia is another guy. Again, he'd be playing in the bottom six, but he might be able to help out with some of your depth scoring issues. I wouldn't mind taking a look at Armia if the price was right. Frolik, no thank you. Philip Deneau, Boston just doesn't really need anything down the middle. I mean, they've got Bergeron, Krejci, Coyle, assuming Krejci comes back, Bergeron, Krejci, Coyle down the middle. Now, if David Krejci doesn't come back to the Bruins, Philip Deneau would absolutely be a guy that I'd be looking at. Deneau would absolutely be a guy that I would look at if Krejci doesn't come back. But I think Krejci's going to be back, so I really don't think they need anything down the middle other than maybe a fourth liner. But Deneau is better than that. Eric Stahl, again, they don't need him down the middle. 36, no. Tomas Tatar, I've soured on him. I don't think he brings a whole lot to the table anymore. And then they got a couple of depth D-men, but I wouldn't be going after Merrill or Gustafsson as far as defense is concerned. So if anybody really stood out to me, it would be either Corey Perry or Joel Armia. I would not mind either of those two on the Bruins' fourth line next year. All right, Toronto Maple Leafs. Do the Leafs have any UFAs that I would be interested in? I'm going to take a look here. I would say the most interest that I would have... Actually, no, they do. Zach Hyman. I would absolutely love Zach Hyman in a Boston Bruins uniform. Hyman can still bring it. He's 29. Again, I don't want you to go out and overpay for a guy like this, but as a middle six winger, Zach Hyman could absolutely bring you some value to your third line. I'd actually love to see him play with Charlie Coyle. I think he's the guy that stands out to me that if I'm Boston, if he hits the unrestricted free agent market, I am calling his agent and trying to make an offer on Zach Hyman. I think he would fit in a Bruins uniform in a middle six role. Philadelphia now. Let's see. They don't have any UFA forwards. They really don't have much in general as far as UFAs go. Brian Elliott in goal. I think Boston is, going to have to bring in a veteran goaltender, but I don't know if Brian Elliott is it. Yeah, there's really not much here I'm seeing in Philly as far as UFAs go. Florida, we'll take a look here. Wenberg and Gusev, I'm a no on either of those guys. Brandon Montour, that could be interesting because Montour can play both sides. He can play left or right. He's kind of very Connor Clifton-y with a little bit more offense and a little bit better overall. I think he would be like a slightly better Connor Clifton, but he can play both sides of the ice. He can play left or right D. He's 27. He was in Buffalo, wasn't doing well in Buffalo, but nobody was. Ended up being traded to Florida at the deadline and was okay in the playoffs for Florida. He's not a great defensive defenseman. You're definitely going to have to pair him with somebody that can, play really well in their own zone, because Montour is not great in his own end, but he's a puck mover that can add some offense from the back end. And if the price was right in a depth role, then sure, I think Montour would absolutely make sense. At least to give a look to. Not saying that you have to sign him, but to at least take a look at. Calgary Flames. All right, they got quite a few UFAs, but no real big names. Brett Ritchie, Buddy Robinson, Josh Lavo, Derek Ryan. I'm not really going for any of those guys. Nobody on the back end either. No, there's nothing here in Calgary that I'm, as far as free agents go, that I'm going for. Calgary is much more of a potential trade partner than free agent pickup. Vancouver, an old friend Jim Benning. Let's see what they got. Not a whole lot here I'm liking in the forward group already. Hamonic can't stay healthy. I like Travis Hamonic. I like his defensive game, but he can't stay healthy. Edler, I think, is well past his prime at this point. Yeah, there's nothing I'm really looking at in Vancouver that I'd be overly excited about. Dallas, we've got Cogliano, who's 34 now, and Dowling, who's a fringe guy. Vatanen, Oleksiak, Pysyk. Sami Vatanen's always kind of been an interesting guy to me. I actually thought that last year, during the season last year, Boston should kind of make a run at him. They obviously didn't, but he's always kind of just as a depth defensive type guy. I thought that Vatanen would always be an interesting guy to bring in as maybe a bottom pair offensive defenseman or as a number 7 guy. I think he could be worth a look depending on how many, if you lose guys off of your D-core or if everyone comes back. Obviously, they're not going to be looking for defensemen, but Vatanen could be a potential interesting option there if they need defensive depth. St. Louis, let's see, we've got Hoffman, no thank you. Bozak, they don't need a center. Schwartz, the injuries with Schwartz are tough. Other than that, I really like Jaden Schwartz's game, and I think if you put him in a middle 6 role in Boston, I think he could be a decent player. The problem is he just gets injured every single year. And Boston already has enough issues with the injury bug and getting guys, out of the lineup because of injuries. So Schwartz would be the only one I'd have really any interest in, but I'd probably shy away because of the injury history. Taking a look now at Nashville. They've got Richardson, Granlund, and Howla. They've got good Branson on the back end. They got Rene in goal. I don't know if Rene might be retiring after this season. But he could be a guy that the Bruins could look to if he's not going to retire and if he's not going to re-sign with Nashville. Boston does need a veteran to, at least start the season with to go along with one of their young guys. Maybe Pekka Rinne on a 1-year deal. I don't know. He still probably could play half a season and be decently, still decent in net. Granlund, though, would be an interesting option because he can play center or wing, as can Howla. But I think I like Granlund a little bit more than Howla. He had a pretty decent year this past year. Again, if the money's right, I think maybe you take a look at him to play right wing down on the third line or something like that. Possibly if you're gonna have Smith still up on the second line, he could maybe be some depth scoring. That's the only one that really sticks out there. LA, I don't think there's going to be anything here that I'd be looking at. Absolutely not. So LA doesn't have any UFAs that I'm really looking at. Winnipeg, yeah, I'm not going after any of these guys. No one's standing out. On the back end, I don't think the Bruins need any, maybe? No. I'd rather have Lausanne or Zaboral or them keep going with the young guys and at least see what they've got in the young guys rather than bring in a Derek Forbert. Although I do like Forbert, but I don't think he's gonna be somebody that you'd be going after. So no one really from Winnipeg, Edmonton. I mean, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has been linked to Boston before in trade rumors. We'll see what happens. You know, he could be a guy that could come in. Now, with Taylor Hall here, again, we don't know if Taylor Hall is coming back or not, though. So, you know, if Taylor Hall doesn't come back and you need somebody for that second line, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins could definitely be an option for the Bruins that I'd be interested in. He's still only 28 years old, but it feels like he's been in the league forever, but he's still only 28. If you could get Nuge, I think he could be a decent player. He's definitely the one out of this group that stands out to me that I would be interested in if I'm the Boston Bruins. All right, the Minnesota Wild. Let's see, Bonino, Johansson, or Bugstad. I'm not looking at any of those guys. Cole or Hunt, no thanks. No, nobody in Minnesota that I'm targeting in free agency. Anaheim. No. They got a lot of RFAs, not a lot of UFAs. Nobody that I'm looking at here as far as UFAs go. With the Ducks, Rangers, Giuseppe is their only forward. I'm probably not interested in him. Brendan Smith on the back end is 32 now. No thanks. We can, you know, I'd rather just let the kids play. So nobody in New York. Columbus. Nope. McInnes, Mateau, Grigorenko, Dalpe, no. Back end, Delzato, Lettinen, no. Nope, nobody really here in Columbus either. Let's see, Colorado. Well, Gabriel Landeskog, I don't think he's actually going to hit free agency, but if Landeskog hits free agency, I'd be in there if I'm the Boston Bruins, especially if Taylor Hall doesn't come back and you need a left wing. Second line left wing, Brad Marchand on the top line, Gabe Landeskog on the second line. That would be a heck of a move. I would be all about that as a Bruins fan if Taylor Hall doesn't come back. And I really wouldn't be looking at Dubnyk for a veteran goaltending option. I think Rene would be better than Dubnyk. Grubauer probably going to be back with Colorado, but we'll see. Boston does. I haven't really focused on goalies here, but Boston does need to do something about goaltending. Let's see. Ottawa, Dzingel or Anisimov? No. No one. Nothing really here in Ottawa. Carolina. Cedric Paquette. Cedric Paquette is a UFA. I would like to see him on as the Bruins' fourth line center potentially. I would not be opposed to the Bruins bringing in Cedric Paquette as a fourth line center. He's gonna bring more physically and more in an agitator role than what Sean Kuraly did. And Kuraly didn't bring any offense. Paquette doesn't bring a lot of offense, but Kuraly didn't either. So, you know, I would not be opposed to bringing in Cedric Paquette to center the fourth line. If you have Paquette down the middle and Frederick on the left side, that's a physical fourth line that can really get under the opponent's skin, and I would not be opposed to that. Also, Martinick or Brock Nelson, kind of the same, or Brock McGinn, excuse me, not Brock Nelson, jeez, I wish. Brock McGinn, I wouldn't be opposed to any of these three from Carolina. As long as they know that they're going to come in and play a fourth line role, I would take any of these three guys, but I think Paquette down the middle would be an interesting move to kind of get that physicality back in the fourth line and that agitator role back for the fourth line. That would definitely be something that I'd be looking at if I'm the Bruins. Arizona. Let's see. Derek Brassard, Michael Bunting, no. Back end. There's some options here. I mean, they're veteran guys, though. That's kind of the issue. Like, Demers is 33, Goligoski is 35, Hjalmarsson's 34. Like, I would take any of those guys, but I would want it on like a 1-year deal. It definitely wouldn't be anything long-term. It would be a one-year deal. Also, Boston needs a goaltender for the first part of next season. Antti Raanta is a UFA. Talk about the goaltending possibilities. Antti Raanta right there. I would not mind having him along with Vladar or Swayman as the backup to start the season next year. And then if Rask comes back, then you send the young kid back down to Providence and you have Raanta backing up Rask, or maybe it ends up Rask backing up Raanta. Either way, I think that could be an interesting goaltending option for the Bruins. And actually, better than the veteran D-men, I would say Antti Raanta would be a guy that I'd be looking at if I'm Boston because of their goaltending situation. Buffalo, let's take a look. I doubt there's much here. Reeder, Sheahan, Caggiula. I mean, I wouldn't mind Drake Caggiula in a, extra forward role or a fourth line role for the Bruins possibly. Maybe it's like as a 13th forward or 14th forward. I like Caggiula's game. I think, he's a high effort player who doesn't have the most talent in the world, but can definitely work hard. Definitely an option there. New Jersey, we're getting down towards the end here. There's nothing in New Jersey that I'm looking at. Detroit, this is going to be the last one because Seattle doesn't have a roster yet. I mean, again, if Corrali doesn't come back and you're looking for a fourth liner, Luke Glendenning's a possibility. I've always liked Glendenning's game. He's a really good guy in the face-off dot. He's a good penalty killer. He's a good defensive forward. He brings that side of the game to the forefront, and he's valuable in that part of the game. Probably not going to get much offensively from him, but as in a fourth line role, I wouldn't be opposed to Glendening if Corrali doesn't come back, and he's definitely the guy here for Detroit that stands out, unless Jonathan Bernier, another goaltender here, and I might next week's episode, I might do a deeper dive into the Bruins goaltending and what they might do as kind of a band-aid while they wait to see, what's going to happen with Rask. And even if Rask comes back, he's not going to be able to play until February. So I might go deeper into the goaltending side of things. Bernier would be a guy that I would absolutely see the Bruins bringing in for next season to go along and have to maybe start at the beginning of the year, and then if Rask comes back, be able to be the backup. But Bernier's had a couple of good seasons now in Detroit with a very bad team in front of him, so he could be an option. And Glendening could be a fourth line option as well. But I think Seattle was the last team left, and they don't have a roster yet, so you're not taking any free agents from them. And that is just about going to do it here, guys. So definitely something different on the show this week. I talked about all the Bruins pending free agents and who I would like them to re-sign, who I think they should let go. Then we just went through all the other teams as well and kind of picked out a guy, if there was anybody, that I think could potentially be of value to the Bruins in free agency. And definitely some options out there. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Bruins do this offseason. This is a massive offseason for the Boston Bruins. They absolutely have to come back a better team next year, or the window is closing with this core group, with the Marchand, Bergeron, Krejci, Rask. With that core group, the window is closing. So it might be next year or bust, and this is a really, really big offseason for them. So what they do in free agency is going to be vitally important to their ability to win another Stanley Cup with this group, or if it's going to be another long wait before they're able to hoist the cup again. So I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I hope you guys found it interesting and kind of fun going through the different rosters and stuff and taking a look at different free agent options. And we're well into the offseason now, so the shows from this point on are going to be offseason related. And I think next week we're going to take a deep dive into probably the goaltending side of things and see what Boston's options are if they need to, completely revitalize their goaltending for next season. Let's say Rask and Halak both don't come back. You've obviously got Vladar and Swayman, but you're going to need some veterans in there, at least one, if not two. And you're going to need some guys that can hold down the fort. So next week might be more of a goaltending-centric episode. But that's going to do it here for episode 26. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget about the links down in the description. Boston Bruins gear, NHL gear, NCAA college gear, all there. Tons of different products, lots of selection. So if you're in the market for any of those things, please check out those links in the description. Again, a big thank you to Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions. This show would not be happening without them. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And that is going to bring us to the end of episode 26. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll be back next week with another one, and we'll be on to episode 27. So have a great week, everybody. Thank you so much, and talk to you soon.